Vanessa, you've welcome to our UK column News Extra. You're short of time. You started to say some very interesting things about the situation in Syria and why it's important. Just, chat through why you think that.
People need to be really aware of what's going on in Syria for a number of reasons. One, this is the vision that your governments have for you. So everything that Syria is suffering, from food insecurity to economic sanctions to media and diplomatic and political surveillance and criminalization,
and children disappearing into black holes.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but while your government is claiming insolvency when it comes to helping out those that are being affected by the COVID-19 lockdowns, of course, they're upping their military budget. They're spending millions, if not billions, on so-called humanitarian aid, which is effectively equipment and support for the armed groups, and most of them affiliated to Al-Qaeda and ISIS inside Syria. For example, the recent giving of 1.3 million to the Al-Qaeda-linked white helmets that the BBC has tried to whitewash multiple times for producing allegedly PPE in Idlib. For a pandemic that is not a pandemic. So I think it's very important that we all start to make these connections, because I think one thing that's coming out of the COVID crisis is this transformation of society away from the archaic paradigms like the left-right paradigm, for example, into uniting us as humanity against them. And Syria is a very big part of that. Syria is teaching us what resistance is. I just said to Brian, someone on Twitter said to me, and I'm not mocking people for saying these things, but it's ironic that they're now starting to say them. For me, living and spending time in Syria and other countries under attack by our governments, someone said to me, oh, but if we start to fight back, they'll take away our electricity. And I'm like, well, yes, that's what they do. And that's what they have done in Syria. And that's why the situation here is pivotal to our survival, because through the Syrians and through the Yemenis, through the Iraqis, through the Libyans, we can find a way to understand how we can survive. I mean, I was saying to Brian, here in Syria, there's virtually no COVID mania. I mean, I go out, if someone's wearing a mask by choice, nobody points a finger at me if I walk into a shop and everyone in the shop is potentially wearing them. Nobody turns at me and glares at me or tells me to get out of the shop. There's complete acceptance of people's choices. There are some government institutions where they ask you to wear a mask. My general response is, I have a medical exception. They wave me on through. The minute you go into the meeting, nobody's wearing masks on a I'm not talking individual basis. I'm talking generally here. But for example, I will now go out. I will get in a car. I will go to a busy part of the city. I will get out. There will be people everywhere. No one is focusing on COVID because they've got way more things to think about. Electricity,
Vanessa,
heating,
have you seen
food insecurity.
Have you seen the Syrian troops wearing any kind of masks? Or indeed, what about the Allied troops doing their unlawful operations around Syria? I know in their home countries they all pose with masks on, like the US Marines. But what about in Syria?
No, in Syria, no. Did you see it in that video of the 16th Division? I mean, occasionally on checkpoints you'll see them, but I think that's more of an instruction. So you'll see them setting an example, but most of the time, the minute that they see you coming, the mask gets pulled down, or half the time it's hanging around their neck. They're not really paying much attention to it. And certainly hugging and kissing and shaking hands and all of this is continuing as normal from day one. I posted at Christmas a scene at one of the Damascus main markets. You couldn't move for people in the crush shopping, and someone was handing a baby in a pushchair over the heads of the crowd to take it forward. This is Syria, and you're quite right to make the point, and it was an important point I wanted to make about the military operations also. From the beginning of the COVID crisis, US coalition troops, so that means UK, US, EU, etc., have been moving cross-border without any masks, without any taking any action against COVID transmission, etc. None whatsoever. And UN officials that I see regularly from the beginning have never worn masks, have never socially distanced, have never followed any of the COVID-19 lockdown rules that we're seeing in the West. So, you know, with Yemen declaring herd immunity in October 2020, we really have to start reevaluating what we do to survive as a human race, not what we do to survive as English people, European people, American people, but as a human race, because that's how important it is right now. They are pushing us into the same scenario as Syria, as Yemen, into food insecurity, into basically buying up all of our planet's inventory to feed scraps to the little people, the ants, as they see us, before they crush us, if in case we dare to challenge or confront them over their criminality. So I think, you know, understanding not so much the structure of the resistance here, but the mentality of the resistance here is very important. And that's why I think it's important to keep countries like Syria and the Middle East and countries in South America that are under attack in the minds of people that are dealing with their own issues now in the UK, and to understand that the unity that you find in Syria is what has enabled them to survive 10 years of probably one of the most punishing wars that has ever been waged against a prey nation by our governments that are now waging that war against us.